Welcome to WanaxTV. In this late night episode, we're talking about the historical descendants of the final Mycenaean dynasty. We're talking about the House of Atreus. Before we begin, I'd like to thank to everybody who's joining us live right now at this late hour. I know it's very late here on the East Coast. I know it's way too late past midnight in Europe, so thank you everybody for showing up. I'd also like to thank to all of the Patreon members, all of the YouTube exclusive members, and of course all of the channel subscribers. Also, before we begin, there's for those who are not on Patreon, you are able to join us for free. There's a free membership. It gets basically almost the same perks as paid members. And we just uploaded some pictures from the featured exhibition at the Getty Villa that happened today in LA, courtesy of a great friend of this channel, History with Sai. He was there in person. He sent us pictures. He recorded some videos, and also make sure to subscribe to him and his great channel. I'm sure that many of you, possibly most of you who are subscribed to WanaxTV are also fans of History with Sai. So shout out to him. He's a great friend to the channel and he's been helping us from the start. Um, with that being said, we are gonna go straight to the topic. The House of Atreus, or the House of Pelops in a broad, if we are talking more broadly, was the final ruling dynasty in Mycenae, in the Mycenaean Greece. We have the mythological Pelops as the head of the house, as you can see, and we'll dive into the mythological part of the dynasty and to the historical descendants who claimed lineage from Agamemnon, from Atreus, and from Pelops. So, without further ado, the House of Pelops, according to Greek mythology, has been founded by Pelops himself, a legendary figure. There are a couple of different stories on his origin. Some of the versions associate him with Asia Minor, with Anatolia, with lands such as Phrygia and Lydia, which describe him as a son of Tantalus, another mythological figure. And in other versions of the story, Pelops was an Achaean from the city of Olynos in Peloponnese. So whatever the case may be, he is the namesake of the whole dynasty. At the time he operated in and he lived on Peloponnese in the city of Pisa, and he managed to acquire the throne of Pisa. He became a local ruler by defeating a king in a chariot race through some trickery, which ended up bringing a divine curse on his whole family and all of his descendants, much of which we're going to talk about um, at this point in this episode tonight. So we have Pelops as a ruler of Pisa at the time when legendary hero Heracles was said to have roamed around Hellas and performed his legendary deeds. At that time, King Eurystheus or Eurystheus was the king of Mycenae, and there's a whole another story of relations between Eurystheus and Heracles. Obviously, Eurystheus was the ruler. He was superior to Heracles in rank, but Heracles was much more respected when it comes to mythology, as we all know. According to the legend, Heracles was supposed to be born before Eurystheus. They are both related. They both come from the house of Perseus. And at the time the previous monarch died, the will of Zeus was whoever was born first, the next baby born within the house of Perseus will become the king of Mycenae. And the will of the obviously Heracles is a son of Zeus and a mortal noble woman or a princess named Alcmene. On the other hand, Eurystheus is a son of Sthenelus, if I'm correct, the previous ruler of Mycenae. And Alcmene was due to have baby first, but Zeus's wife, the queen of the gods Hera, she defied she defied the will of Zeus and caused Eurystheus's mother to bear a child first, thus making Eurystheus the king. And thus we have Eurystheus as the most powerful figure in all of Greece at that point in time. This is relevant to the story. We'll get to why this is relevant to the story. At this time, a figure named Pelops is a king in Pisa, in a relevant city within the region of Elis in western Peloponnese, but not very relevant when it comes to the big picture, the Aegean region and so on. We do know that the peninsula is called Peloponnese, and yes, it was after this Pelops, and probably the result of his successors. That this is just my speculation. It doesn't say anywhere in the myth, as far as I know, of how exactly Peloponnese was named as such. Either way, Pelops, as you can see on the screen in the house of Pelops, he had two sons, Atreus and Thyestes. And these two sons were sent to Mycenae, where they were noblemen. They were nobles on the court of King Eurystheus. Meanwhile, Heracles was performing his deeds throughout Greece and beyond. He performed the famed 12 labors, which were instituted by Eurystheus. He was the one who made those labors for Heracles, thinking that they were impossible to accomplish, thinking that Heracles would die trying, but he succeeded, and thus his legend only grew. Eventually, Heracles passed away, and Eurystheus, perhaps fearing his Heracles' many children, that they would come back to challenge him and claim the throne of Mycenae for themselves, Eurystheus started hunting down the sons of Heracles. He exiled them, and he was trying to get them killed by any means. The leader of the so-called Heraclidae, which is a name of the descendants of Heracles, was Helos. Helos was the son of Heracles. He was a great hero himself, obviously not on the level of his dad, but he was a great hero nevertheless. And he sought refuge in Athens at some point, which Eurystheus found out, and then he first requested Athens as a minor kingdom compared to he to his power. He requested Helos and other sons of Heracles to be extradited to him. The Athenians refused. Eurystheus, together with his 5 sons, gathered the Mycenaean army and marched straight to Attica, where his intention was to seize Athens by force and presumably execute Helos and the other Heraclidae. Unfortunately for Eurystheus, fortunately for Helos, the Heraclidae, together with the Athenian allies, sailed out. They gave battle to Eurystheus, and they defeated Eurystheus's army. King Eurystheus, together with all 5 of his sons, died in battle, and thus the Mycenaean throne was left vacant. At this point in time, the brothers, sons of Pelops, Atreus and Thyestes, are left behind in Mycenae on the Mycenaean court as stewards of the Mycenaean court. They were in charge while Eurystheus was campaigning in Attica. However, when the king died, the two brothers seized the Mycenaean throne and become joint rulers of Mycenae. Obviously, joint rulers doesn't really work, so they start fighting immediately, and on top of that, Helos and the Heraclidae, they want throne of Mycenae for themselves. So they invade Peloponnese, but according to the mythological accounts, they face fierce resistance from the Peloponnesians, from the Mycenaean army, which is apparently loyal to the sons of Pelops. And this was the first Heraclid invasion, the first Heraclid attempt to seize the throne. They are defeated, beaten back. Helos withdraws for the moment and lets the situation on the Mycenaean court play out. Atreus and Thyestes are fighting each other, and according to the mythological story, everything ends up with Atreus killing the children of of his brother Thyestes, and he does a heinous act, serves them as on a banquet to his brother, who then is exiled away from Mycenae. Atreus seizes the throne, becomes the king of Mycenae, and furthers the curse upon his house in the process. Gregory Michael Nixon says mythology is not history. No dynasty continued. Well, we'll get to that. It is important to say that mythology is indeed not history. This mythological house of Pelops, house of Atreus that we're talking about, it is present only in Greek mythology and the subsequent ancient Greek records, which are written down from the 8th century BC onward, so at least 4 or 5 centuries after the collapse of the Mycenaean Greece. So that is indeed the case. Whether the dynasty continued or not, the ruling dynasty did not continue, but we do have historical figures who claim descent and lineage from this mythological house. Namely, we're talking about the city-states in Achaia on northern Peloponnese, and we're talking about the city-states in Aeolis in Asia Minor. So we'll eventually get to these rulers. There's a historical king, Agamemnon of Kyme, in the city of Kyme in Aeolis on the Anatolian coast, which is opposite the island of Lesbos. So and also the rulers of the island of Lesbos in the archaic times claimed the same thing. They claimed lineage from the house of Atreus. Whether or not that is correct, whether or not they were indeed the descendants, that's impossible to determine. But we do know that Greek oral tradition was strong, but we also in the Dark Ages. But we also do know that a lot of stories were added to whatever happened in the past. Um, so we never know. Same thing goes for the Heraclidae of the historical times. The kings of Sparta were supposedly descendants of Heracles himself, a mythological figure. So the same goes for the rulers of Achaia and Kyme and Aeolis in general. They did claim lineage from Agamemnon, from Atreus, and from the house of Atreus, house of Pelops. Oscar Erickson says, Hail Wanax. Lyre or Leary or Lyre says best channel ever. Let's go. Well, thank you very much. I don't think that, but we'll at this point where when we are working on the big documentary which limits our ability to produce regular WanaxTV episodes, we are compelled to do these live, more casual versions of the show to compensate for the lack of regular content, which we will resume shortly. Actually, not very shortly. We'll resume that in a month after the big Etruscan documentary is completed. So before we continue with the story with the House of Atreus and the historical claimants of its lineage. A quick update on how we're doing with the channel at the moment. Right now we have another big live episode. It will be about 2 hours long. It is I've already finished all the preparations for it. We're talking about, and I will display it on the screen right now. We're talking about the Mycenaean Hittite conflicts in the late Bronze Age. As you can see in the segments, I have prepared 10 segments for it. We have the historical background, 15th century BC, which includes the Mycenaean conquest of Crete. It includes the Hittite expansion in western Anatolia, and then the clash between the two powers on the western Anatolian coast and the surrounding lands. Which brings us to the indictment of Maduwata. Maduwata, a ruler from western Anatolia who sought Hittite protection against the Mycenaeans. Then he switched sides and allied himself unofficially to a figure named Atarsia of Achaia, a Mycenaean general who fought the Hittites. It resulted in a crushing Hittite defeat in the lands of Lucca, the lands of Lycia, and subsequent weakening of the Hittite power not only in western Anatolia but the Hittite kingdom in general. They suffered defeats on many fronts, and they entered the period which we know the Hittite Wars of Survival, which lasted for many decades. Eventually, the Hittites were revived by King Shuppiluliuma I, the great king. His successors were able to defeat the land of Arzawa, and we have a fall of Arzawa as the third segment. Subsequently, obviously the Mycenaeans did not like that. The Achaeans did not like that. So we have Achaevan ladder. We have a territorial dispute over some islands, which we'll talk about. We have subsequent conflict over Velusa, or historical site of Troy. We have subsequent Alexandru Treaty, where historical Troy were vassals of the Hittite Empire, and emergence of Piyama Radu, almost legendary warlord of Western Anatolia who fought Hittites at all fronts and lived through the reigns of no less than four, at least three, but very likely four Hittite kings. We have subsequent weakening of both Mycenaean and Hittite power in Western Anatolia in the mid to late 13th century BC. We have the Trojan War and possible references to the Hittites. When it comes to the Trojan War, we'll explore that a little bit. And finally, the Bronze Age collapse. We'll go through that and conclude the giant episode. It's going to be a deep dive live show. I did not want to do it tonight. Obviously, we don't have a large audience at this moment because it's so late. So this is a special late night episode, very very casual, nothing too serious. And so we have a question. What are your thoughts on the upcoming Odysseus film by Nolan? Are you referring to the Odyssey, which is in the works? Is it called the Odyssey? Um, I will have to go back and double check on I double check on that. I am not too familiar. I read about it about a month or so ago, and then I forgot. Hopefully they do it right. Hopefully, well, you know that they are never going to be 100% correct either when it comes to historicity or closeness to the mythological story. But we should not expect that either. So if it's a good movie and if it's close enough when it comes to the events of the Odyssey, I guess that should be fine. But we'll see. We'll see. I don't know anything about it. I would have to double check I from what I heard, they got pretty good actors for it. Um, Perhaps some controversy. I don't want to have I don't want to give any thoughts without refreshing my recollection of that and seeing for myself. But hopefully they do it well. Let's hope. Okay, so we'll remove this Mycenaean Hittite segments and we'll go back to the House of Pelops, which is the topic of tonight's episode. Uh, so, so where are we? Pelops' sons Atreus and Thyestes, they go to Mycenae. They seize the throne after the king Eurystheus is killed fighting the Heraclidae. Then the Heraclidae themselves, they attempt to invade Peloponnese. They are beaten back by the Mycenaeans for the time being. In the meantime, Atreus does some heinous acts. He kills the children of Thyestes and seizes the throne for himself. He has two sons or grandsons, depending on the version. Either way, Agamemnon and Menelaus were either sons of Atreus or they were his grandsons through Pleisthenes, who apparently died prematurely, and Atreus took them as his own sons. So it doesn't really matter when it comes to the story that much. They were either sons of Atreus or grandsons of Atreus who were taken as Atreus's own sons after his son Pleisthenes died. So when it comes, so now we have Agamemnon is obviously designated as the successor on the Mycenaean throne. On the other hand, Thyestes is not done. So three of his sons, Aglaos, Orchomenos, and Callias, have been killed at this moment, and he himself does a heinous act now, goes to tell how crazy the curse of the house of Pelops was, or the curse of the house of Atreus. But we do see that both parts of the Pelopid house were cursed, both Atreus' side and Thyestes' side. So Thyestes has a daughter, Pelopia, and by his own daughter he has another son, which is yeah, so that son is named Aegisthus. So Thyestes and Aegisthus pledge revenge on Atreus, and eventually that comes to fruition, but not immediately. We have another attempt by Helos, by the Heraclidae, to invade Peloponnese, and there is a single combat between Helos himself on one side and Atreus did not fight him personally. There was a hero from Arcadia who did so and he killed Helos, and thus the second Heraclid attempt to invade Peloponnese failed. Grubonieri says they went to the Levant, even the Cretans went to the Levant. Um, yes, so one of those successors sailed to Asia. His name is Cametes, and we do not know where. So it could have been Asia Minor, it could have been Cyprus, it could have been Levant, but we'll get to Cametes and his brothers and that part of the family in a bit. So right now we have Atreus as the king of Mycenae, son of Pelops, the first in his dynasty to rule as the Mycenaean king. Thus, his uh, his branch of the dynasty is known as the House of Pelops, House of Atreus, excuse me. Pelops himself was not a Mycenaean king; he was a minor king in the city of Pisa in the region of Elis in western Peloponnese. So So where are we? We are at the point where Thyestes is exiled, and he has a son named Aegisthus, his fourth son, technically. Aegisthus, he goes undercover. He goes back to Mycenae. He becomes a member of the Mycenaean court, a nobleman, but he doesn't reveal his identity. I don't know how he managed to do that, but that's what the story says. And we are still in the mythological part of the story, so it's okay if some stuff don't make sense. But either way, Aegisthus manages to assassinate Atreus and thus brings his father Thyestes back to the throne. So now Thyestes seizes the Mycenaean throne. He is now the king, and Atreus's children, Agamemnon and Menelaus, they are exiled to Laconia. They do not accept Thyestes as the king. They raise their own armies. They are aided by a local king in Laconia, a Spartan king, and they go back. They defeat Thyestes, and Thyestes is, I believe, exiled to Cythera, where he dies, and Aegisthus's life is spared. Agamemnon becomes the new king of Mycenae, the overlord of all of Greece. His brother Agamemnon becomes the king of Sparta. Then we have the Trojan War. Both brothers survived the Trojan War, not like the movie Troy, where I believe both of them died. It was a good movie, though. Troy with Brad Pitt, great movie. Not not really close to the story, not but it was a good movie nevertheless. But either way, Agamemnon and Menelaus survive the burning of Troy. They come back. However, the curse continues. Agamemnon is assassinated by Aegisthus, who he spared. While he was in Troy, Aegisthus managed to get together with Agamemnon's wife Clytemnestra, and they have an affair, and they conspire against Agamemnon. Obviously, Agamemnon's wife Clytemnestra, she has her own motives for that, and that motive is Agamemnon sacrificing his own daughter Iphigenia before his Trojan campaign, so that the gods can guarantee him victory in Troy. Another crazy act that's happening within the cursed house of Pelops. Crazy stuff in that dynasty are never ending. So so because he sacrificed his daughter before the Trojan War, while he was in Troy, Iphigenia, his wife, has an affair with Aegisthus. And upon his return, he returns to Mycenae victorious. Very shortly afterwards, he is assassinated. Aegisthus becomes the new king of Mycenae, and he marries Clytemnestra, or I'm not sure if they officially married. I would have to double check that, but it does appear that he either way he marries or is together with Clytemnestra. She's still the queen of Mycenae. They have a son named Aletes, who they designate as the successor to the throne. On the other hand, son of Agamemnon, Orestes, obviously does not accept that. He raises his armies, he comes back, the war continues. Eventually, Aegisthus is defeated and killed. Orestes not only doesn't spare Aegisthus, he doesn't spare his own mother. So he kills Clytemnestra as well. And at some point in time, shortly afterwards, I believe Aletes, son of Aegisthus, is declared king, but very briefly, Orestes comes back to Mycenae, kills Aletes, seizes the Mycenaean throne, and becomes the new king. He also, upon the passing of Menelaus, takes the throne of Sparta and incorporates Sparta and Laconia under his direct rule. And now we are slowly approaching the this not quite yet. We are slowly approaching the time period of the late Bronze Age collapse. Uh, Historically, we are still in Greek mythology, so we're not worried about that for the moment, about the historical Bronze Age collapse. We are only worried about the mythological story regarding House of Pelops. And Orestes is the new king right now. So we have Atreus and Thyestes as joint kings at first, joint de facto rulers. We have Atreus seizing the throne, exiling his brother. We have he's succeeded by Thyestes, who assassinates him, together with Aegisthus. And then Thyestes is defeated by Agamemnon. So Thyestes is the new. So Agamemnon is the new king. He wins the Trojan War, comes back. He's assassinated himself. Agamemnon is succeeded by Aegisthus. Aegisthus is actually killed in battle, or seized and slain after Orestes' victory by Orestes, Agamemnon's son. We have Aletes, son of Aegisthus, briefly succeeding Aegisthus on the Mycenaean throne before he himself is slain by Orestes once again. So Orestes is now the undisputed king of Mycenae. All of the he he destroys the whole line of Thyestes. There's nobody else, and he also marries, I believe, Aegisthus's daughter at some point, and he has two children. One of them is his son Tisamenus, the successor to the throne from the first marriage, and then Pentheus from the marriage with Aegisthus's daughter. And sources are different whether Pentheus was legitimate or illegitimate child. Um, Either way, Orestes is now the undisputed king. His sons are Tisamenus and Pentheus. And finally, there's no more wars within the family, but there's a new threat looming. Rob O'Neill says, followed the blue dye straight from the Black Sea. Crete then found in factories in the Levant, making Hebrew blue tassels, while the Phoenicians made the red dye, or I would add a purple dye, right? It says the sheer tragedy of the Greek text is pretty raw. Yeah, I know. I mean, did all of this happen historically? I would not say so. This is straight out of Greek kitchen of mythology. This story. So it would have been too much if historical events really went like this. So we do have to note that following the collapse of the Mycenaean Greece in about 1200 to 1100 BC, we have some for let's say about 4 centuries, close to 4 centuries of no historical record, just oral tradition from one generation to another. So you can imagine that each generation of those epic poets would add a thing or two to their story to spice it up, as it usually happens with oral tradition. And then by the time these stories are recorded, we have a distorted picture, which does not necessarily, or in many cases, does not correspond with the historical reality of the late Bronze Age at all. Some of the things are somehow historically accurate. Some things might be derived from historical events or real historical figures, and some mythological stories are just made up. Obviously, that's how it works. Either way, King Orestes, he beats back a third invasion of the Heraclidae. It's not explicitly said that he did it, I believe, but it is said that one happened during what could only be his reign in Mycenae, also unsuccessful. And I believe during his reign, he institutes the first colonies or colonization attempts away from the Greek mainland. We do know that the Mycenaean Greeks did have colonies themselves, but that was in the late Bronze Age. Now we are entering the period of the Mycenaean collapse. Now we're talking about the second half, mid to late 12th century BC. Orestes is considered to be a mythological figure still because there's no contemporary historical evidence that he existed. And technically, same goes for his sons, Tisamenes and Pentheus. Orestes here has a long reign. He is considered a successful king, a great king. He has a long reign. He dies in Arcadia out of from a snake bite, I believe, and he is buried in Arcadia, a mountainous region in central Peloponnese. And he's succeeded by his son Tisamenes, the final king of Mycenae in the late Bronze Age. Tisamenes, who is also technically a mythological figure because at this point in time we do not have historical records. The Linear B records, just as a reference point, the Linear B records disappear in the early 12th century BC. I believe 1180 or 1170, shortly right after the Trojan War is believed to have ended. We have disappearance of the Linear B records in continental Greece. Actually, the disappearance of the Linear B records period. We have destruction of the city of Pylos. We have a burning of Mycenae. It wasn't completely destroyed. It continued to operate as a palatial center, but greatly reduced. And we have much of the Mycenaean Greece destroyed. It is reduced to an area in Argolis. It is reduced to Mycenae itself, and it is reduced to the palace center of Tiryns, which emerges in importance. There's believed to have been an influx of Mycenaean population to Tiryns because apparently it was better defended at the time. There's no other explanation. But either way, the Mycenaean Greece is largely destroyed throughout at this point. There's no more Linear B records. So we have in some way entered the Greek Dark Ages, but we officially entered them after the event which is in Greek mythology considered to be a sack and destruction of Mycenae, and that is the death of Tissamenus in Greek mythology. So Tissamenus, he defeats the fourth Heraclid invasion, and then the fifth invasion is led by three brothers. It is led by Temenus, Aristodemus, I believe, and Claudius. I would have to double check those names actually. Let me quickly double check. We have to be accurate here. So Aristomachus and Crispantes, I'm sorry, yes. So the three brothers, three descendants of Heracles himself, Aristomachus, Crespontes, and Temenus, Temenus the eldest brother. He seizes, he has, they have a great battle. They are aided by the Aetolians and some Boeotians, some Thebans, I believe. They defeat Tissamenus, the final king of Mycenae. They sack Mycenae itself, and they split much of Peloponnese among themselves. Temenus becomes the king of Argos. He seizes Argos. He chooses Argos as his seat of power, which is in Argolis. Until that point, Argos was a minor palace in Argolis, secondary to Mycenae, Tiryns, even Medea. It was a bigger citadel than Argos. Still, Argos held some importance, but from the Greek Dark Ages, it really it really there's rise of Argos in Greek Dark Ages, and it becomes by far the most prominent city in Argolis, and one of the most prominent in all of Peloponnese and Greece, at least continental Greece for a time period. So what happens to the sons of Tissamenus? What happens to his brother Penthelas and his children? Tissamenus is defeated, I believe he is defeated somewhere in the land of, somewhere in northern Peloponnese, and the Heraclidae, led by Temenus and his brothers, they bring a huge contingent of Dorians with them, who are now masters of Argolis, Laconia, and Messenia. Grubb says the invaders to Mycenae were the ones who brought horse riding and the knowledge of making vowels. I'm not sure about that. Um, Horse riding was present in Mycenaean times as well. You can see on the frescoes, horses were not only used for chariots. It is dubious whether or not they were used in war. There, I don't think there's much documentation on cavalry. So if we're talking about warfare, horses were not prominent except for the chariots. Obviously, chariots were very prominent. But horses, when it comes to hunting, when it comes to horse riding, they were prominent in late Bronze Age in Greece, in Mycenae, for sure. So back to the story. We are now slowly exiting Greek mythology and entering historical or semi-historical times. We're entering the Greek Dark Ages. We have sons of Tissamenus. He had 5 sons, namely Cometes, Deimenes, Tellus, Sparton, and Leontemenes. Cometes was the eldest, of Tisamenes' children, he did not stay to claim the throne. He left to Asia. He sailed to Asia before the final invasion of Peloponnese and the defeat of his father Tisamenes. So Comitis sailed to Asia. There's only one line saying that he sailed for Asia. It doesn't say where. It doesn't say what happened to him. He could have sailed to Asia Minor. He could have sailed to to Cyprus. I'm sorry, and he could have sailed to Levant. I'm not sure. It is impossible to tell, but his whereabouts end there. His other four sons, Diomenes, Telis, Sparton, and Laotomenes, they are not punished or killed or harmed by the Heraclidae and the Dorians. They made some sort of a deal for safe passage where they leave Argolis and they go north. They go to the northern Peloponnese, which in classical times is known as Achaia. At that times it was known as Aegialus. Aegialus, and it was inhabited by Ionians. So Ionians, who are very closely related to the Achaeans themselves, and not as closely related to the Dorians, obviously, but they are very closely related to the Achaeans to the point where the rulers in northern Peloponnese, the Ionian rulers, they refused to accept the sons of Tisamenes, the Achaean nobility, because they fear that the people of northern Peloponnese will elect them as the rulers of the land. So Ionians are afraid of the reputation which the Achaean princes have among the Ionian lands in northern Peloponnese, but the sons of Tisamenes, Diomenes, Telis, Spartan, and Leontomenes, together with their cousin, a son of Penthilus, Damasias, which you can see on this family lineage. Penthilus himself, the brother of Tisamenes, he survived. He fled to Asia or left to Asia. He had two sons of his own, Echelas, also known as Archelaus or Echelatos, and Damasias. So at this point in time, we are now talking about early 11th century BC. So now we have entered the Greek Dark Ages, and this is still oral tradition, but it is not oral tradition from the heroic, legendary times of the heroic age of the Greek mythology, where legendary deeds are performed. These are more of a semi-historical accounts of ancient Greek tradition, much closer to the archaic times when we have the emergence of ancient Greek alphabet. So not quite historical times, but not mythological times either. Something in between. Let's call them accounts of Greek tradition from the Dark Ages. Not really mythology, but not history either at this point. Not contemporary. No contemporary records for these events at this point in time. So the four sons of Tisamenes are able to defeat the Ionian leaders and expel them from northern Peloponnese. They take the cities. They are now the masters of northern Peloponnese, and they call it Achaia from that point on. And we do not know which son took which city for himself. We Diomenes, presumably the second oldest son, whether he ruled in Haliki or somewhere else, we do not know. But the northern Peloponnese not as consequential in classical Greek history as some other parts of Hellas. Nevertheless, Helike, a place where King Tisamenus was buried, we do know that Helike was a site which was destroyed by tsunami and consumed by the sea in the historical period in Hellenistic age, which likely served as an inspiration for Plato's story of Atlantis. So that city, Helike, was the chief city in Achaia, followed by cities such as Aigion, Pellini, and others, Patras, Dimi. The city of Patras was inhabited by the allies of the Achaeans from by the Achaeans from by the Laconian Achaeans, Preugenes and his son Patreus. They were the founders of the city of Patras in northern Peloponnese in Achaia. And so on one side we have, on Tisamenus' side, we have the four sons. They are in Achaia. And on Pentheus' side, we have Damasias, who also goes to Achaia, and he is equal in standing with the four of his cousins, and he's also equal in standing with Preugenes and his son Patreus. So there's no single ruler anymore. All of these nobles are now successors of the house of Pelops, or at least many of them. The force, everybody except the Laconians, Preugenes and Patreus. So we have uh, we have them in Achaia, and we have Achelas, son of Pentheus, the grandson of Orestes. His father Pentheus, he goes to Asia Minor to colonize that region, and he goes, I believe he stops somewhere in Thracia. Whether or not he reaches Lesbos in the end is it differs depending on the account. His son Achelas has a son named Gras, and Gras is the one who he crosses into Asia Minor. He defeats the natives at the river, which after him becomes called it comes to be called Granicus, the famed Battle of Granicus, a river where Alexander the Great had one of his first battles in the invasion of the Persian Empire, the Battle of Granicus. So that river of Granicus is named so after Gras, who crossed into Asia in Greek Dark Ages and defeated the native population there. And he moved southwards, where he declared or became king of Aeolis. He founded the area, the historical Aeolis. It was Aeolians are they consider Gras and his father Pentheus as one of their founders. And it is called Aeolis and not Achaia because the army that they used were Aeolians from Boeotia and by extension from the area of Thessaly. So those Aeolians were recruited by Pentheus and his son, and they sailed for Asia. They defeated the natives. They found the region of Aeolis, of which Gras was the first king. And according to some sources, he was a king in Lesbos. Either way, descendants of Gras were called Penthilii, and that was an aristocratic family in Lesbos, a ruling family in Lesbos, I believe. Mytilene, if I'm not wrong, or Methymna, either one of those cities. or both. Um, I'm not I'm not sure if it was both or just Mytilene, but the ruling historical ruling house in Lesbos, on the island of Lesbos, called themselves the Penthilii after Pentheus, the son of Orestes, the grandson of Agamemnon. So we have this historical aristocratic family claiming descent from Agamemnon, from the house of Pelops, and from the last Mycenaean dynasty of Greek mythology of the that corresponds to the late Bronze Age collapse. Also, on the mainland of Asia Minor, in Aeolis proper, we have other two descendants of Agamemnon through another line, which is presumably through one or some of the sons of Tissamenus, because if it's not through the line of Pentheus, then it must be through the line of Tissamenus, right? So we have Doros and his son Clewes, and we have Malaos. So Clewes and Malaos also arrive to Asia Minor after Gras, and they embarked on the coast. They defeat Pelasgians. They take their main stronghold, which is Larissa. They reduce it to a minor settlement, and they create their own city, Kimi. Kimi, one of the chief city-states in Aeolis in historical times, the historical ruling house of Kimi in the Archaic period in the 7th and 6th century BC, 8th, 7th, and I believe 6th century BC. They were ruled by kings. They were not, they still had Basileus or a king at the top of the society over there, at the top of the city-state, perhaps not with absolute rule, of course, but the title still existed. And I believe in the 8th century BC, that title was held by a man, a historical ruler named Agamemnon of Kimi. Why is this Agamemnon important? Because his daughter was Hermodike, the wife of King Midas of Phrygia, the historical King Midas. His wife was Hermodike, and his wife was instrumental, according to some sources, in the development of the Hellenic Greek alphabet, of the, I believe, Eastern version of the alphabet. So Hermodike or Damodike, her alternative name in some of the sources, was a daughter of historical King Agamemnon of Kimi, who claimed descent from Agamemnon of Mycenae. He claimed descent of Clewes and Malaos, who in turn were great grandchildren or grandchildren of Tissamenus, and by that line they were direct descendants of Orestes and of Agamemnon, and that would mean historical members of the house of Atreus. So right now it is 11:20 p.m. here on the East Coast, which means about past 6 a.m. in Greece and Europe, which is why we do not have many Greeks online right now. But when it comes to the topic of the night, this very casual episode, we'll see if this will be available. The replay of the episode might be available on Patreon, but it will be free for everybody. You don't have to be a paid member or anything. You can just go to Patreon and watch, or we might keep it on the channel just for everybody to take a look. We'll see about that. But yeah, a very casual and yet complicated episode, I guess, because the House of Pelops is very complicated itself. We have Pelops who committed atrocity to become a king, a minor king in Pisa, a not very relevant city in the great scheme of things. We have his sons, Atreus and Thyestes, committing several atrocities each, really. We have their own children. We have Agamemnon and Menelaus, the sons of Atreus. Agamemnon obviously did commit atrocities, carries the curse of Atreus, the curse of Pelops, carries it well. On the other hand, we have Thyestes and his son Aegisthus. They carry the curse also. They commit a number of atrocities. Agamemnon is assassinated by Aegisthus. Agamemnon's own wife, Clytemnestra, has a hand in it. According to some sources, he also used an axe to kill Agamemnon. So a lot of atrocities on all sides. Agamemnon's son Orestes, he was no different. He destroyed and killed and exterminated the whole line of Thyestes. He killed Aegisthus and his son Aletes, and with him the curse stops, I guess, within the House of Pelops, because one branch is exterminated. So only Orestes' branch continues, only Agamemnon's branch continues. There's no more inner fighting. Tisamenus succeeds the throne with no problems on the from within, but with a lot of problems from the outside. The Heraclida eventually defeat and kill him, and that marks the end of the Mycenaean Greece, the fall of Mycenae, and we slowly slide into the historical times where a number of aristocratic families and historical individuals, historical Greek kings, do claim descent from mythological Agamemnon, Atreus, and Pelops. One of them is historical King Agamemnon of Kyme, a city in Aeolis in western Asia Minor, the coastal Anatolia. His daughter, Harmodike, also known as Damodike, is a historical wife of King Midas of Phrygia, the final historical king of Phrygia before the fall of Phrygia to the Cimmerian invaders from the north. Agamemnon of Kyme was apparently a wealthy ruler and important and powerful individual in Asia Minor, important enough to have his daughter married to the king of Phrygia, which is a great kingdom at the time. Subsequently, it is unknown. I do not have sources or records on who the historical Agamemnon of Kyme was succeeded by, but presumably the title of Basileus or king slowly started to lose in power. Perhaps it still existed only in name, only nominally by the classical times, but perhaps not. I would have to do due diligence and research on that, but I don't think that there are many or any records of that lineage continuing into the classical times. But Agamemnon of Kyme is definitely a historical figure, and he did claim lineage from the house of Pelops. He did claim lineage from Agamemnon of Mycenae. On the other hand, we also have rulers in Aeolis, but now not coastal Aeolis, but the island of Lesbos. We have historical ruling clan or a family called the Pentilii or Pentilioi, who claimed lineage from Gras and his father Pentilus, or his grandfather Pentilus. So Gras and his father Echelas or Archelaus and the grandfather Pentilus, and through that line they go to Agamemnon and Atreus and Pelops. So we have those two historical ruling families in Aeolis and Lesbos, respectively. And we also have uh, aristocratic families in Achaia in northern Peloponnese claiming lineage from from a mythological Agamemnon of Mycenae through sons of Tisamenus, and these sons were Diomenes, Tellus, Sparton, and Leontemenes. And also we have the eldest of the sons Comitis who left to Asia before the fall of Mycenae, so they do not claim descent from him. But either way, we have two branches, one through Tisamenus, one through his brother Penthelas, and each branch had historical claimants of that lineage in the archaic and classical times. With that being said, I think that it's time for us to conclude this little episode, and we will see you soon. We will have Mycenaean Hittite conflicts, a live episode coming shortly within a few days. I might do a poll. The reason I do not want to do it this late because it would be a disservice to the topic. Really, it wouldn't get many views if I do it this late, and I'm not able to do it earlier throughout the week due to nature of my work. So I'm not really able to do it. Perhaps one of the days I could do it, but we'll see. We'll see. I want to get my I want to be prepared and I want to have enough time where if it's over 2 hours that I don't want to worry about it. So the Mycenaean Hittite conflicts is likely heading for the weekend, either Saturday or Sunday. And if you want me to, in the meantime, I could do some lighter, casual episodes, some late night live episodes. You can choose the topic, we can talk about it. Tonight, the topic was a really not a popular topic, but a very casual topic, the historical descendants of the last Mycenaean dynasty. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you soon.